I would give your attention to Holly Cahill, our treasurer, for the annual budget meeting.
Okay. Here, you can, here, how about the, you, go ahead and pull that up, please. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Well, it's been the law for many, many, many years that local governments prepare a tax budget at the beginning of, for schools, it's in January, and for other entities, it's in July. So every year in January, we're supposed to prepare a tax budget, and the point of that tax budget is to verify the mills that will be charged to property owners for the following year, for the year that begins for us July 1. And that's one of the reasons for it. And the second reason is to show that you do need the funds. And so that's not hard to do for us. I've kind of struggled with that myself because I'm thinking, who would not need those mills? But I guess it's for certain things. If you have like a bond levy and your bond ends and you're still charging those mills, and you have to show you have mortgage payments. So anyway, I guess it comes together for some schools. But anyway, we've never had that problem. We always need this tax money that we charge our voters. So what happens is the new property values come out in a report to the county auditor, and they're certified by the state, and the county auditor gets them, and then he picks a time to meet with me, and we go over what the mills should be for the coming year. And so we're on the same page with that. And so once you all approve them, then this is what our homeowners will see in the coming year. So so why don't we just flip through it? Just the tax budget, the first page shows there's three funds that receive tax money: the general fund, the permanent improvement fund, and the bond fund. And the general fund receives the most money. That's where we pay most, our salaries and our benefits and purchase services and supplies for all educational programs we have. And there's about $14 million of tax money that goes into that fund. The permanent improvement fund receives the least amount of money. We use that to pay off several loans that we have. One is for the stadium, one is for the field house, and one is for central office. And there's about $800,000 that's collected in that fund, and about $400,000 every year is used to pay for those mortgages. And that 2.03 mils never changes. That we'd move inside mils. But anyway, that 2.03 mils never changes. Then the last is the bond fund. And that will not change from now on, but it did change in the past. So what happens in the bond fund is we get our tax money, we pay our mortgage, we pay our interest, and then the next year comes around and I meet with Mike Stein and say, okay, this is what our mortgage will be next year. And so he and I work together to make sure the mills will cover that mortgage. And but we're pretty well set that it'll be 4 mills from now on until that bond is paid off, which will be in 2029. So that the bond fund is only for that mortgage, and permanent improvement fund is to pay those loans, and any leftover money in that permanent improvement can be used to pay for technology, can be used to pay for textbooks, and it can also be used to pay for permanent improvements of facilities. So we've accumulated quite a bit in that fund. So if you go to the next pages, so and that's that's another showing our mills and showing how much it's going to collect. And this goes to the county auditor in the next page. So the first is we put together our report for the general fund, and we show how we're going to use that money. We not just for this year, but for 23, and then we also show 24. So you make projections on that. The next page is the bond fund. So we show what money we expect to be collected through those mills, and then how we're going to pay that debt, the principal and the mortgage on those. So And then the next page is the permanent improvement fund, I think. Yeah, so, okay, and then, okay, why don't we switch to I have a slideshow too. So, yeah, that, let's see, I think it's, yeah, the middle one. Okay, so, go on. This is the Ohio Revised Code, which has been in effect for many, many years in Ohio. Okay, so we're going to charge 35.41 mils for the general fund, and it's expected to collect $14.3 million in this coming year. And then the permanent improvement funds, that's 2.03 mils, and we expect it to collect $823,000. And then the bond fund is that 4 mils, and we're going to stick with that 4 mils, and it's going to collect about $1.6 million. Okay? Okay, so I did want to point out, so we have these 3 loans, the stadium, and these are the amounts that are, the principal amounts that are remaining on those loans. And what I'm happy about is the loan for the field house will end in 2024, so that'll be knocked off the slate. But the loan for central office and bus garage will continue to 29, and then the other loan for the stadium is 2034. And we did investigate whether we could pay these loans off early, and there's no real benefit to doing that. You still owe the interest principal. You can't get out of this. These were made, you know, in early 2000s, before all the before they started putting restrictions on financial loans and that kind of thing. So, but once we get those done, then we'll be set. So, okay, and what's the next slide? Oh, okay, so there's this is the bond fund. And in 26, we've refunded the bond. We've broken it apart and refunded it as interest rates have gone down. It's kind of like remortgaging or refinancing your house, not remortgaging, but refinancing your house. And we've done it 3 times to try to save taxpayers money to get lower interest rates. And so we did it in 06, we did it in 16, and we did it in 17. And so the ones in 06 will end in 26. So that's going on, but all of it will be gone by 29. So what we hope is, you know, if we do, which we'll likely have another bond because of another building, what we'll try to do is wrap these into that and take advantage of some of the savings. I mean, there's a way to do it, and it's very complicated, and I'm not going to explain it because I don't quite understand it, but it's kind of like you buy another property and you kind of use your old loan and work it through together and get a better interest rate. That's what I've been told. So we'll work with financial advisors to do that. So, but those are still outstanding. Okay, and what's the next? Oh, this just shows also the history of our mills too from 11, and it's a little different in 11 and 12, and I could go through explaining it, but the red is the bond fund, and remember when in 11, we had to get that bond fund straightened out because at that time we were using it to pay general fund expenses, and so they were charging higher mills, so nobody knew that, you know, and so we got that straightened out. We don't do that anymore, and that's why money is where it's supposed to be every time we meet. It's always supposed to be where it's supposed to, you know, in the general fund or bond fund or permanent improvement. But as you can see that mills have gone down over time, and that's good because, and that's because our values are growing, and so that's encouraging to know, and we want it to. We don't want to tax our taxpayers more than we really have to, and so that just gives you some idea. So that's all I really have to say at this point, unless anyone has any questions. And you don't have to have questions at all.
Holly, the mills have gone down, what, 4 points since 13? Is that right?
Well, I had a little chart. They were 40, let's see, they were 45, yeah, they've gone down about 4 mills. Well, they were even 47 mills in 16, and then now they're 41.
41,
so,
yeah, 6
so
mills.
6 mills.
Yeah.
I mean, and, you know, so, and I mean, we try to do that as much as we can, but, and because I keep bringing up the fact that we're capped, and we're still capped, we have to rely on our local taxpayers.
Right.
So, but that's why, it's been encouraging, because for a while they were, quite higher. And maybe 41 now, 41 mills, and maybe next year it'll be 40 and 39 and 38, we'll see. So we said on a $200,000 home, in 2013, it was $3,200 a year, but in 21, it's $2,900, so it's gone down $300, for homeowners. So that's what we want to see. And I did mention that we do have some property tax abatements, and there's $5.2 million that are abated through these abatements. And I think one will end in 25. A lot of it's in Warren County, and in 25, one property will become unabated, and that will help the mills when that happens. So we're kind of keeping our eye on some things, and City of Monroe is working with us on that to know. And they've had actually an analysis done with an advisor to show us these things are rolling off, and that'll improve your property values, and then your mills can go down. So, but the first is in 25 or 26, so hopefully. It's so complicated, it really is. This is really a complicated district, more than I'm used to. But, I've grown up with it, so I kind of know it now. So
after 2029, from the items listed, the only thing that will be remaining, that will be outstanding, is going to be the stadium.
Stadium,
Okay.
yes.
All right.
Yep. So, yeah, and then we'll be ready for some new improvements.
Yeah, right.
But, yeah, it'll be, I think, we'll get past those and you start a new building, and, we'll see how this community changes, how the values change, and all that's gonna have impact, and how the state funding will change, and, and this is only the first year of the state funding change, that we're really due. Well, the last was now for 13 million, and we're getting 6 million, so it's still half, but we're only getting 1/6 of it to get to be fully funded. So we can't forget that we still are capped.
Right. Okay, any other questions? Thanks, Holly.
Thank you, Holly. Thanks, Holly.
Can we start early on the organizational meeting?
There's no time on it, so you should.
It says 6:15.
Don't worry.
Can we start a couple minutes early in the organizational, or no? Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
At this time, I'd like to call to order the annual organizational meeting for the year. So I would like to have, Mrs. Hagedorn, Mr. Fulham, and Mr. Carpenter out in front of the board, and Ms. Kay Hall, would you administer the oath to them?
Yes. No, you too. And you're gonna have to do it for Vice President. Get it twice. What did you do this? I know.
Yeah, you're fine.
Screw up both of them, no problem.
Do you solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that you will faithfully and impartially discharge your duties as members of the Board of Education of the Monroe Local Schools of Butler County, Ohio, to the best of your ability and in accordance with the laws now in effect and hereafter to be enacted during your continuance in said office and until your successor is elected and qualified.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to all of you.
Welcome.
I know, right? Ms. Kay Hall, would you call the roll, please?
Be
Mr. Leeds,
Here.
Mr. Carpenter,
Present.
Mr. Grant,
Here.
Mrs.
Hagedorn.
Hagedorn,
Here.
Mr. Fulham.
Here.
Thank you.
There's a learning curve there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any additions or corrections to the agenda?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Grant, second by Mr. Carpenter, that the agenda be approved. Ms. Kay, I'll call the roll, please.
Mr. Grant,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
and Mr. Leeds.
Aye. Motion carried. At this time, I'll entertain a nomination for president.
I'd like to nominate Dave Grant.
Okay, Dave Grant's been nominated. Do we have any other nominations? If not, the nominations are closed, and I will ask for a vote, just a verbal vote to accept Mr. Grant as president of the board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Mr. Grant, would you step out in front of the board and Ms. Kay Hall administer the oath, please?
It needs calibrated.
All right, thank you, Mr. Leeds. Next, item 8.1, I need a nomination of the office of Vice President. May I have a motion or a recommendation?
I'd like to recommend Mr. Carpenter to that position, please.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Is there any other nominations for Vice President? Okay. May I have a motion? Well, can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. All right. And with that said, with the office of the Vice President, with an aye, or do we roll call vote? No, we don't have to?
No.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? No? All right, Mrs. Kale, will you please administer the oath to Mr. Carpenter? 2 in one night.
Do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Ohio, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge my duties as Vice President of the Board of Education of the Monroe Local School District of Butler County and the State of Ohio to the best of my ability. And in accordance with the laws and effect hereinafter to be enacted during my continuance in said office until my successor is elected and qualified.
All right, moving on, now that the nomination of the Vice President is closed and the vote's taken, move on to Section 10, establish the Board Service Fund. It is recommended that the Board establish a service fund beginning January 1st, 2022, in the amount of $20,000 for calendar year 2021, pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 3315, or .15. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Go ahead, Debbie.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Any questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Section 11, appoint legislative liaison, Monroe Area Community Improvement Corporate Representative and Butler Tech Board of Education Liaison for 2022. It is recommended that the board appoint a legislative liaison, Monroe Area Community Improvement Corporation Representative, and a Butler Tech Board of Education Liaison for 2022. It is recommended the board appoint one member to serve as the Monroe Local School District's legislative liaison to the Ohio School Board Associations for calendar year 2022. And I would like to recommend that our legislative liaisons, Mr. Leeds and Mr. Carpenter. Okay. Is anyone else good with, everyone good with that? All right, I'm going to write those down. Let's see, Tom. The Student Achievement Liaison for the Ohio School Boards Association for calendar year 2022. May I have a motion on that, or a recommendation for that?
For student achievement?
Yes.
I think it should be AJ.
Yes. Anybody else for student liaison, student achievement? And it is recommended the board appoint one member to serve as Monroe Local School District's representative for the Monroe Area Community Improvement Corporation. And a recommendation for that.
I think Tom has been doing a bang-up job, so I'd like to recommend Tom.
And I would second that.
Okay, thank you.
It is recommended the board appoint one member to serve as the Monroe Local School District's representative of the Butler Tech Board of Education.
I move that we appoint Brett Guido.
Yes, and I would second that, just simply because Brett, there's some change over at Butler Tech, and Brett has been there for a while, and with that change, it's important that he's going to step into that role. He knows the ins and outs of
Right.
of that district.
Plus the fact he's been in the middle of the new building.
Correct. So.
Yeah, they need some consistency.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. So with that said, any questions? All right. May I have a motion to move forward to a roll call vote?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Go ahead, Debbie, second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. All right. Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Section 12, appointment of board subcommittees for 2022. The first is a facilities subcommittee. So at first, I was talked with Robert and talked with Holly, who then talked with our attorneys. At first, the whole purpose, I wanted to try to have the entire board as members of the facilities committee, and it was recommended per our attorneys to not do it that way. Just because at that point, it becomes a
Board meeting.
Becomes a board meeting
Yeah.
at that point, and we have people from the community and businesses that are part of that committee. So with that being said, what we're going to do, and the reason I wanted to do that is I really wanted to just show the community that as a board, I know we've all talked about this before, that a new building is very important to this district and is important to every one of us, and I wanted to let the community know that by us all being a part of that committee. So with that being said, as far as the facilities subcommittee, we can still only have 2. So I'd recommend that stay the same with Tom and Tim, but what we will do is have work sessions that will be included probably quarterly.
Quarterly or more often if we need
Yep, if we need to. That would include all the board members, so we can all be a part of that process
Right.
as we move along.
Right, that works.
So, so my recommendation would be for Tim and Tom, and if everyone is okay with that. Okay? And the finance subcommittee? Can I get a recommendation for the nomination for the facilities or the finance subcommittee?
We
Debbie?
meet about quarterly as well. We meet about quarterly, if not more, but.
Okay,
we-
for the finance.
For
For
finance.
finance, just to,
And that's always before the meeting,
well, or other times.
or other times.
Yeah.
Okay? Tim, you were saying?
Yeah, I'd like to recommend Debbie.
And I would recommend Tom for the facility, or for the finance subcommittee. May I have a motion on Tom and Debbie?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. See, now you're throwing me for a curve. I'm used to just writing 2 initials there. Now I gotta write 3. I'm just gonna put AJ.
That's all right.
All right, Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Section 13, it is recommended the board approve the following legal counsels for the Monroe Board of Education for the calendar year 2022. For such matters as may from time to time be referred by the board, superintendent or treasurer / CFO. A, Enos Britton, Dinsmore, previously Peck, Schaefer, and Williams for the bond counsel, and Rich and Gillis Law Group. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
AJ.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Any questions?
Nope.
Okay, Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Section 14, appointment of Records Commission for 2022. It is recommended the Records Commission of the Monroe Local School District be comprised of the President of the Board of Education, the Superintendent, and the Treasurer, CFO of the district. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Section 15, it is recommended that in accordance with Section 3313.26 of the Ohio Revised Code, the board waive, the reading of the minutes from previous meetings. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Are we sure we want to waive?
I mean, we... Hey,
I've already read it.
Are you, I
we
mean,
can read them all. If we like meetings to go to 11, we're good.
I mean, Tim, would you like to read them every time?
Can we jerk the vice president?
Any questions? All right. That was Debbie on the motion and Tim as the second. May I have can you please call the roll, Mrs. Cahill?
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 16, recognition of newspapers of record. It is recommended, or recognition of the following as newspapers of record for 2022. A, the Journal News, and B, the Cincinnati Enquirer. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Can we have some discussion?
Yes, we can have some discussion. I would like to have them cover Monroe for once.
That's exactly right.
So,
You know,
I mean, they don't cover anything.
no.
I mean, I'll take it for some things, but a little recognition for our students and our
Exactly.
student athletes. I think they've earned it and they deserve it.
It's exactly right. I'm tired of the saying that they turn in news articles and that the editor will not let them print them. That's ridiculous.
They need a new editor.
Right.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right.
I've got a lot of comments.
We'll keep them to ourselves. I think it was my first year on the board, so 7 years ago that the last time a reporter was here covering our board meetings. So it's been a while.
They forgot to leave crumbs the last time.
Yep.
Can't find them.
Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Section 17, renew membership in the Ohio School Boards Association, including the Legal Assistance Fund. It is recommended the board authorize dues for memberships into the Ohio School Boards Association for 2022, as well as membership into OSBA's Legal Assistance Fund for 2022. The OSBA's Legal Assistance Fund costs $250, and the OSBA membership for 2022 costs $5,625. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
We
Any
need
questions?
we need to lean on them to get our money's worth out of them, really.
I agree.
The legal assistance, it shouldn't be any problem, but the membership fund of $5,625, we can do better than what we're doing, I think.
Yep.
So,
Good point. Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Section 18, approved 2022 board meeting dates. It is recommended that the board approve the board meeting dates for calendar year 2022. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Any questions? Those are our dates. All right. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Section 19, resolution adopting superintendent standing authorizations for calendar year 2022. It is recommended to enable the superintendent to carry out necessary district duties involving operations, finances, and purchasing. It is recommended that the board adopt the following standing authorizations for the calendar year 2022. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. And Section 2, resolution reviewing the current parent and family involvement policy 2111 as required by the Ohio Department of Education. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. motion carried. Section 21, the approval of the tax budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. It is recommended the board approve the tax budget for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Out by the bush. Any questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Item 22.1, approve the treasurer's standing authorization for 2022. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Any questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. And section 23, it is recommended the board adjourn the meeting at 6:36. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And it's official.
All right.
Nice.
All right.
I think I gave somebody two.
And I guess we are ready to roll right into the regular meeting. All right, we will call to order the January 10th, 2022 regular meeting.
Zach, you're not allowed to leave.
You're leaving already? Well, where's he going?
Where's it going?
He's like, I got homework
Gotta
to
get ready
do,
to rest.
guys.
Yeah, I gotta get ready for the Bama-Georgia game. Homework.
At work, yes.
So is your dad a school board member now? Yes? What does that mean?
So there was an organizational meeting, now there's the regular meeting.
Regular meeting.
Okay? If you want.
If you want.
You're welcome to.
All right, Mrs. Cahall, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Grant?
Here?
Mr. Carpenter?
Present.
Mr. Fulham?
Here.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Here.
And Mr. Leeds?
Here.
Would everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 1.3, any additions or deletions to the agenda? Thank you. Item 1.4, it is recommended the board approve the agenda. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Moving on to Section 2, discussion and comments from the board. Item 2.1, legislative. Mr. Leeds.
I only have one thing. Last meeting, I talked about the taxes being refunded in some of these tax areas where the board has no say. And the House Bill 126 went through the commission, but it went back to the House for some corrections. And the session on that is January 19th. And they're asking anybody that can to get a hold of the legislative group to tell them that, back off of this for the school districts, because we should have a say in reducing the taxes in our area, which if we lose some of the taxation, the public's going to have to pick it up. And we need to make sure the legislators that they look at that and they make the decision knowing that they're going to hurt our taxpayers.
Is that something that we could come up with a template, like a letter?
We could, it's recommended that we, just get a hold of our legislators and tell them.
Okay.
So I would like to recommend that we send a letter as suggested to the senators to try to, with Lang and send one to Hall, because he doesn't matter which side of the fence, he'll jump in the middle of it. And at least get our name out there that we don't like it. The other thing I would like to report that there is a lawsuit in Columbus by citizens of Columbus and other members of the Columbus hierarchy, so to speak, against Ed Choice. And this lawsuit is, according to the people I talked to, they got a good chance of winning that thing. And if they do, it will take the burden off the local districts in funding Ed Choice. So I can't tell you when it's going to go to trial. If it goes to trial, be settled out of court, I don't know. But there is a big push up there, and somebody, has grabbed that bull and going to throw it, I guess. So we'll wait and see.
That'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Because if Ed Choice goes down, then I think that, you're going to look at vouchers and everything else.
I think that's got to be the first of the first domino.
Yeah, and be a domino effect if it gets any traction.
Okay.
So that's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Guido will be here next meeting to give us an update on Butler Tech. Anything from?
Did you see out there, though? Do you have a lot
Yes.
of the beams set, everything out there?
Yes, so if anyone hasn't seen it yet, right there next, I think the first floor is pretty much done. The steel's been erected, and they're moving quite along pretty well. So hopefully they don't get any supply chain issues.
Right.
When it comes to the electrical, I can assure you they will. So, but hopefully it's not too bad.
Is your statement on that is still on the boat?
That's pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Just a simple electrical panel. We just placed an order for one for a customer, and we got an estimated ship date of August.
Oh, my goodness.
So, and that was done in December. So,
Wow.
Oh, wow.
so about a 9-month lead time. Anything from MEA?
Everything is fine at this time.
Oh, there,
You're hiding behind the
yeah,
podium.
yeah. Everything.
Dave's hiding behind.
Yes. Noted. All right, very good, thank you. All right. I thought I did do finance. Oh, finance. Anything from finance?
Nothing at
I
this
know
time,
Holly
no.
just did the,
Yeah,
so we're good.
nothing,
All
we're
right.
fine.
Thank you for catching me. I thought, in my mind I did that.
That's okay.
Can we,
man.
I have a comment. Can we go back to the Bill 162? Is it possible, I'm sure it's possible, but should we get a template or something like you had mentioned, Dave, for the teachers or the community
Like a form letter?
Yeah, form letter to send out to them?
I
I think
can
the more
search
they
that
hear
out.
from us,
Yeah, we can search that out from OASBO. I mean, I know there's some templates out there for that kind of thing.
to
But
kind of get
from
that out in the
I made
community.
a note to look for one.
Yeah,
and get that.
from the
Yeah.
board.
That's something we can send out with an email or something like that to all the parents in the community. Because the more they hear from us, the better.
Yes.
We did
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I think that the more they hear that they, were
We don't
against
want
it, that
Right,
it might have more of an impact.
Yep,
right.
agreed.
It makes a difference.
I'm sorry, Holly, you were going to add something to that?
Oh, no, I was just exactly what
Okay.
he was saying. We need to get it together and get it for y'all and then
Get it
and then
distributed.
send it out and do it.
Okay.
So,
All right, section 3, recognition.
At this time, I would like to recognize that January is Appreciation Month for school board members. So I have a certificate of appreciation for all of our board members here. I do want to say that we are very fortunate here in Monroe that we have a very supportive and informed and knowledgeable board, and it has been a in my short time here, I have been more than impressed with the way the board operates, and I know with our two new board members coming on board, they've been impressive as well, and will continue the streak of excellence with our school board members. So at this time, I do want to recognize each and every one of you.
Right, I'm not getting ready.
I'm just stretching anyway.
I was just, yeah. Thank you. Stretch in the back.
Yeah, that's what it was.
I was like, man, I'm getting back.
Everybody but you.
Yes. I can see the picture.
Not even here to the
Exactly. Thank you, Robert. All right. Moving on to section 4, comments from the public. Seeing none, we will move on to section 5, treasurer's business. And item 5.1.
Okay. I'm asking the board to approve the minutes from December 13th, 2021.
Tim, would you like to read those?
Let me open them up for you guys.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 5.2.
Next, I'm asking the board to approve the bond fund report for December 31st, 2021.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Okay. I'd just like to report there was no revenue for the bond fund, and we paid $174,120 in principal and interest on our bonds, and the ending cash balance in our fund is $3,026,301.
And in honor of Mr. Guido, is all the money where it's supposed to be?
Yes, it is.
All right. Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 5.3.
I'm asking the board to approve an assignment agreement between Prologis and Kroger. Okay.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Have we gotten our monies?
We've not got our monies yet, but we're going to be due our money in June or July
Right.
of '22. And I just spoke to our attorney today, and he's reviewed this agreement, and he sees no reason that Kroger or Prologis will be paying what's due to us it's for 2021. And they'll owe us property taxes. And he says it'll be between one of them. He says, but we will be getting our money, so.
Okay.
And just to clarify, this agreement is a duplicate, easy for me to say, a duplicate of what the other agreement was, not just being
Yes.
moving over to
What
Kroger's.
it's saying, yes, is that Kroger's going to take responsibility for the same terms as that Prologis agreement. And they're going to fulfill that Prologis agreement.
Okay. All right.
So,
Do we know, is that sale finished?
is what?
The sale of the
My
building?
understanding it
Yeah.
is finished. I meant to look them up. They're under Fred Meyer, not Kroger, on the auditor's website, but
Right.
that sale's done. They're moving forward on it.
Okay. Okay.
So, in fact, they took the Prologis building down off the auditor's website because searching for that. So I was searching for Kroger, and I didn't realize they were under Fred Meyer, so, but they should be on there. I meant to look today, but to see them taking it over.
And completion, if I remember right, is quite a few years away, like a couple of years, isn't it?
Yeah, because there's going to be a lot of changes down there with that building, the way it's built.
Correct.
So there's be some additional, I know there'll be some additional parking
HVAC.
and HVAC, and I think, well, the last I heard, that either a big portion of the building, or at least some of it, is going to be just like the new building Kroger built with the automatic stuff, but maybe the whole building. I don't know. So, I know that the new building that Kroger built is really ramping up. I mean,
You see the trucks everywhere.
I know,
They're everywhere.
yeah,
All over Dayton.
Yep.
Everywhere.
yeah, so.
All right. All right, any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Lees?
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Item 5.4,
And last, I'm asking the board to approve a membership in the Ohio Education Tax Policy Institute for 2022.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
And I explained the cost of this is $1,000, but they're starting to fight for schools like us who are capped, and they do influence legislation, and we're going to work with them. I've seen them come a long way, and so anyway, it's a good thing to be a member and to support them, because I
Okay.
think in the long run, it's going to help us.
All right, very good. Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye, motion carried. Thank you, Mrs. Cahill. Section 6, Superintendent's update.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. I just have a couple quick things here. I did want to talk briefly, unfortunately, to talk about our current COVID situation. We often reflect what's going on around the country, and as you know, numbers are rising very rapidly. I don't know if you saw my posting today. Our numbers within the building, students and staff, is the highest it's been all year. The silver lining in all of that is that with the changes to the quarantine and isolation guidelines that they've adjusted since the school year started, although kids, obviously there's students that do have it, our overall attendance is about normal for what it would be this time of year. I mean, with cold and flu season, there's a lot of everything going around. So what we are doing is working closely with our health department, keeping an eye on things, recommending that if you are not feeling well, stay home. We had discussion with high school administration. They were going to roll out a new attendance incentive, which is great. We want kids here, but we had discussion that overall, we don't want kids coming to school when they're ill. So it's better to, we kind of push that back, and we'll see what situation we are in the fourth quarter. But again, our biggest question and concern is staffing. Just with, knock on wood, we've been very fortunate. We have had staff members out, but we are not at a point where we are afraid that we're going to have to close down temporarily or at this point. I did send that communication out to parents, and I think I may have panicked some people. That's really just a worst-case scenario. If we did do something, it would be very temporary basis with the changes to quarantine and isolation, with being able to come back after 5 days. I could see at some point, if we had an outbreak amongst staff, to maybe close part of a grade level or something, and just say you're home for the next 2 days and come back Monday. I know for a fact, like today, Franklin High School, they were I don't know how many total staff members were out, but they had 10 classrooms that were going to be completely uncovered, and they just couldn't get it covered, so they closed today. But looking at attendance, I believe they're going to be back open tomorrow. So again, our staff members have been wonderful. They cover for each other on a daily basis, internal coverage, doing what they need to do. The good news about this is that although it is, numbers are really high right now, they are saying that they think in the next 2 to 3 weeks it will peak and then go back down to a very reasonable, manageable situation. So we are keeping an eye on things, and right now our numbers staff-wise have been fine, so we will continue to monitor the situation, and if it does change, I will obviously communicate that. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that last couple board meetings, we talked about the OFCC project, and that we submitted our application for the ELP project that will lock us into that rate. It has been received, and now we are in the process of gathering information for them so they can do updated enrollment projections. And I believe the email, didn't it say March? Hopefully we would get approved finally by March so we could start to look at finalizing our improvements to the building. Jesse and I have also been working with SH&P on different options. As I've shared with you, best case scenario, we get our number comes up and we're able to build. That's 5 to 6 years out, and we can't survive 5 to 6 years without adding some sort of space. So we are looking at different options that we've all talked about with, and one that some numbers came back, and once we get everything in order, probably maybe February, do a work session to go over all that in detail. But if we were to look at some sort of field house that could hold the weight room, wrestling room, and trainer's room, that would free up a number of spaces to add additional classrooms. The renovation of all those classrooms would be co-funded by the state. I have a meeting set with, or I'm going to be getting a meeting set with Premier Health, who is our partner, which we're very happy with, but our contract ends soon. So to look at possibly renegotiating that, see if we can get some additional funding from Premier to possibly help with part of that structure. I also had a meeting with Kroger set for Wednesday, but they canceled on us because they are having a uptick in COVID in their employees, so they're not doing anything right now. But we are, look to extend, our stadium right now is, we don't really have a stadium name, so that's something we could explore to get in some additional funding for some additional space there. Because I think I've shared before, if we were to do a field house with that to free up the space, the renovation of the space could get co-funded, but the freestanding building would be something that would not be co-funded. So we could look for some sources of revenue coupled with some of our permanent improvement. The district has done a really good job of saving up to fund that. We've also, we're getting prices on, nobody likes them, but some modular classrooms. That could be like a worst case scenario, but the numbers that came back, I think it would be less expensive or about the same to do a freestanding, to a field house, and that's something that we could use well beyond when the new building is completed, and not, temporary, yeah. And I hate to say it's a waste of money because it's something needed, but modular classrooms, I feel like they're very expensive, and they are exactly.
Yeah.
So we are continuing to work on that, and probably next month we will set a work session so we can go dive into that a little deeper and look at our options, and hopefully by then I'll have been able to have my meeting with Premier. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
Very good.
Good.
Good updates. All right, moving on to Section 7, Superintendent's Personnel Business, Item 7.1.
Next section is to approve some resignations, just some coaches. I do want to point out that one coach on there, although we are losing him as a coach, I don't know if you saw that he has been, Coach Ryan Evans is actually the new head football coach over at Wilmington.
Yep,
So
I saw that.
hate to lose him, but congratulations to him, and we appreciate his time here in Monroe.
Yeah. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. I will add, just my interactions with him in the coach's room when I'm getting the starting lineups, he's contagious. He's full of energy, and he's a good guy. So congratulations to Wilmington. They got a good guy.
Good.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I saw the video on social media. It seemed like the students were all pretty excited for him too. So, I mean, that speaks to a lot of like a coach's character and everything when the athletes are
Right.
excited for him and he's leaving,
Yeah.
right? So they got a good
Absolutely.
one over there. So
Yep.
congratulations to him.
Yep. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.2.
Recommend the following employees. They're all, 4 of those employees are going to be subs, which we desperately need.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.3.
Recommend the following extracurricular contracts.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions?
I was excited to see Oster as the boys' head soccer coach. So welcome back,
Yes.
Coach Oster.
The only question I have is, in the contracts that we are putting out for these coaches and everything, the extracurricular, is there any kind of a clause that we can put in there that in case the state says, hey, you can't have these, you can't have any track and field because of COVID or whatever, that we can, make sure we're
I
not,
think we did that
I
last
believe we
year.
did that last year.
I know.
We
Do we-
actually have it, it's going to be.
is it permanent though?
That's a board policy, I believe.
Yeah, we approved that board policy last year.
Okay, but I just want to make sure it's a rollover, that it takes care of it, because
I don't think we're going to have to use it, but
I
I
hope not,
understand
yeah.
what you're,
Yeah.
yes.
I hope not.
No, we won't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of
Glass half full. All right. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.4.
It's recommended that the board approve the $500 stipend for Dara LaForest for coordinating the FAFSA activities for high school students, and it is paid for out of a grant.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? So does she help the students with FAFSA and all that?
She's coordinating
Yes.
trips to colleges and
Good.
events that involve
Well worth
FAFSA.
FAFSA. Ugh. 8 years of my life I'll never get back. Wow.
I'm just starting.
No fun. You got to do it every year, regardless. All right. Mrs. Cahill, any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.5.
We're asking to approve the stipends for the student teachers from Miami University.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions?
I just wanted to share with that for those of you that may not be aware, that's actually comes from the university. They just changed it. I don't know how long ago they changed it.
A long time ago.
It has to come through our payroll. It used to go directly to the teacher, and then the teachers would actually get stipends, and then the teachers would sell them, and it just became this whole thing. I mean, that's how I paid for most of my master's. I would buy certificates. So they just changed it, so it comes through the.
I think
So you
we
were the
pay
reason why it
retirement, we
changed.
pay.
Well, what they would do is they would give you stipends for credit hours.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so it'd be, it would be, I think, like 3 credit hours at the university or 6 during the summer. And so they would, a teacher would sell it for half of what the class would cost. So it was actually reasonable. So that's much
Wow.
less money than they used to give out.
Gotcha. All right.
Yeah.
Like Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am probably the reason that they changed it.
Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Section 8, Superintendent's Other Business, item 8.1.
It's recommended that the board approve a following donations. There is a donation from an anonymous donor for $100 to the Cheer Fund.
May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Thank you for the donation.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 8.2.
It's recommended that the board approve a 3-year contract with Ingenuity in the amount of $10,260 to digital libraries with resources for students with credit recovery. And again, this is paid for out of a grant.
Okay. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 8.3.
It's recommended to approve the 2-year contract with Goldbook Toolkit membership and services through 2023 in the amount of $18,380. Again, this is for students with credit recovery, and it is paid through a grant.
Okay. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 8.4.
It's recommended to approve the extension of the remote learning plan through the end of this school year. We actually did this last time, but the state ODE, as they, are famous for, they did not approve it because there was one word they didn't like, so we had to change the one word, and so now we are. I don't even remember what the word was that they
It
didn't
was
like.
extension?
So, but basically, it is the remote plan in case we were ever to have to go remote. They just want a plan in
Okay.
place, and it's the same one that you used the last 2 years. So
Okay. But they wanted to change one word of
that
that.
was one word they needed changed. So.
We've got a lot more time. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 8.5.
It's recommended that the board approve the early graduation of the following students for December. We had a number of seniors that finished their credits and are graduating. They all are eligible to come back and walk in the spring if they would like. So congratulations to all those kids.
Absolutely. Congratulations. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Any questions?
I just want to say congratulations and job well done to these students. It's a big milestone, and really proud of each and every one of them.
Get
Very
it done
true.
a semester early.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope they come back in the spring to walk across. I
Yeah,
really.
me too.
Tom, do most of them come back and walk?
The early grads, do
The early
most of them
grads,
come back and walk?
Do most of them come back and walk?
Nine.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
And usually the big things they ask when they're setting up this, are they allowed to go to town? Can they still walk the ground?
Yeah.
Okay.
What about extracurriculars? Are they
Are they still eligible to play spring sports and stuff? No?
No. Nope.
Gotcha.
We make that very clear.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit dicey with the winter, sports, but we will do that.
Okay. All right. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 8.6.
It's recommended the board approve the 22-23 course description book. This was the course description that Mr. Prohaska went through the last board meeting. This is just the approval of it.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Any questions?
I have a comment. I'm pretty excited about some of the classes, the new classes that are coming out for the kids.
We are always looking to expand their opportunities, and the challenge is always how do we give them more opportunities without having the space to do it. So it's a work in progress and a challenge, but they do a great job of it.
Absolutely. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 8.7.
It's recommended the board approve the resolution to declare transportation impractical per ORC 3327.02.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Seconded.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. Mr. Busker, could you just explain a little bit about this?
So public schools, some people don't even know this, we are required to transport students not only to Monroe High School or Monroe schools, but if you live in the Monroe School District and you attend a private school, we're required to transport those students as well. But they do have some restrictions on that. If there are not enough students going to the certain school, and the school does not have to be in the school district. But if the school district is too far away and there are not enough students going, and you can see they have listed there some of the provisions, you can, working with the transportation department, they will declare the transportation impractical, meaning the cost would be too much for the district to transport one student, a very far distance or a couple students. So if it is declared impractical, they do a payment in lieu of, and there's a formula to pay the family a stipend for them transporting their own student. The reason it is on here tonight is that right now we only currently have one student that this applies to, but the reason it's on here tonight is that as things go on throughout the school year, if another one were to come up, it gives me the authority to work with the transportation department to do that, so we don't have to come to the board every single time somebody requests it. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 8.8.
It's recommended to approve the following out-of-state trips for track and field. It is just in Louisville, Kentucky, and they won't be staying overnight, but because it's out of state, it does need board approval.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mrs. Hagedorn,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Fulham,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. And item 8.9, calendar of upcoming events.
All right, that's just the, upcoming events here. Nothing to add there.
Nothing there? All right. Before we move on to section 9, adjournment, we'll start with comments from the board. Mr. Leeds.
Well, again, I'd like to congratulate everybody, the new board members that were given the oath tonight and on the board, and look forward to working with every one of you, and I'm sure we're going to have a good but a busy year. And also back in the saddle with the change in semester, but hopefully we can see a very vivid light at the end of the tunnel with this Omicron and in the COVID and everything else and get rid of these masks so we can start living normally.
Yep.
So hopefully that would be taken care of. I think, would you say mid-February? Isn't that what I heard?
They think it might even be sooner than that.
Sooner than that?
The way it's spreading, they said. I read somewhere, the second to third week of January, which is only a couple of weeks out. Now, whether that, who knows? But I do think the next few weeks might be a little bumpy, but as you said, I feel like I see the light at the end of the tunnel
Yeah.
here that, things are definitely improving, so.
It's good. And again, thanks a million to the staff for working so hard to keep things going and keep the kids in school.
Yep.
And to you, Mr. Buskirk, for your job, the job that you're doing. It's great. That's all I have.
Thank you. Debbie?
I'm excited for taking the oath today and actually starting being a part of the member of the board and working with everybody. And I'm just excited for the opportunity.
Glad to have you on board.
Thanks.
AJ?
Yeah, I echo that. Thanks to the community for putting the trust in us to join this awesome board. Want to publicly thank Leslie and Brett for a job well done. 12 years is a long time. Day one was a lot, so 12 years is awesome. And not knowing what they had to face back then and hearing some of the stories and the things that they went through is just phenomenal and a testament to the community putting the right people in place to get the job done. So looking forward to being a part of the future growth and that trajectory. Looking forward to working with everybody on the board here, Robert and Mrs. Cahall. It's going to be awesome. And then I've got my 3 awesome things. So I want to mention 3 awesome things every meeting, so hold me to this. So the first is I want to give props to the athletic boosters for their Main Street Cafe. They've done a phenomenal job of bringing a new flavor, literally and figuratively, to the Main Street entrance. If you haven't had some of the coffee or cookies, please do. It's really good, so great job to the athletic boosters. I want to give a huge high five to all the drop-off and pick-up staff at the primary building, which I have to go through each morning. It is cold and rainy sometimes and snowing sometimes, and we get in and out phenomenally fast. So thank you. There's many faces that are part of that, so thank you guys. And I want to also congratulate Ryan Evans on his movement into Wilmington. He and I formed a nice friendship on the field this fall, and echo everything that everybody said about him earlier. Just a ball of energy, and bummed to see him go, but love to see people who have earned it get that opportunity. So those are my 3 awesome things this month.
Good. Mr. Carpenter.
All right, my turn. I'll keep it pretty short. Just want to welcome Debbie and AJ to the board. Look forward to working with you guys. I do want to encourage everybody to do what you can to stay healthy, wash your hands. If you want to wear a mask, put one on. Don't get up in people's faces. A, that's weird, and B, it's weird, so don't do that. Again, I just want to thank, I know it's really tough right now in the building, so thank you to all the teachers and the staff and everybody who's covering for people who are out, and kind of, I know kids are kind of gross too, so I know there's a lot of like snotty stuff going on, so thank you for putting up with that. I don't know if I could deal with that, so you guys are much better people than I am, so just thank you. And lastly, just because my nieces go to the University of Alabama, roll Tide.
All right. First off, Debbie and AJ, it's going to be a pleasure working with you. Glad to have you on board on the school board. It's going to be, like Tom said, we're going to have a pretty busy, but I think it's going to be a pretty fruitful year for the district, and things that we have on the agenda and things we have working on. I will echo what everyone else said. Kudos to everyone, all the administrators, teachers, staff, everybody. I said it back in 2020, and I'll continue to say it until we get through this. It definitely takes a village, and Monroe has really shown what that village really is like when everyone comes together for a common goal. So kudos to everyone involved in making, getting through COVID as best as we can, because it's unknown, it seems, every day, and you guys make it go by pretty quickly and smooth. So thank you for that, and that is it for me. So, with that said, I'm gonna grab my gavel here in a minute.
Getting too excited, buddy. He's getting
My gavel.
I want a good, nice.
It is recommended that the board adjourn the meeting at 7:20. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Hagedorn.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fulham. May Mrs. Cahill please call the roll?
Mrs. Hagedorn?
Aye.
Mr. Fulham?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned.
All right.
Everyone have a great evening.